What are the recent changes that have happened in regards to tax in the UAE?
So under these circumstances, instead of the normal corporate tax rate of 9%, which may be applicable, you may be able to benefit from 0%.
I make a lot of people very happy.
Hi, and welcome to our latest episode of Talking Dubai Property.
Welcome, welcome. So, today's an exciting episode. We are joined by a Mr. Shiraz Khan, who is the partner and head of tax for the largest legal firm in the UAE, Tamimi Co. Shiraz has been in the region for the last 15 years, has a barrister as a background, and has been with the company heading up the taxation side of the business for the last 7 years. So thank you very much for joining us, Shiraz.
Thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jade.
Thank you. So we'll fire away. So basically we're going to ask all things tax today, which is a really hot topic, especially now with corporate tax coming in. So let's fire away. Firstly, what are the recent changes that have happened in regards to tax in the UAE, and how will these changes impact the region?
If you look at historically, of course, there's been no federal taxes in the UAE, and there were some fees that were being charged at the federal level, at the Emirates level, both for owners and also for tenants. So there was very limited taxes, but more recently, we've obviously in 2018 seen the introduction of VAT, and in 2023 we saw the introduction of corporate tax, and these are of course going to have a major impact on property investors in the UAE.
When it comes to VAT, okay, how does that and where is it applied with property? Okay, because I know that there are some differences between if you're looking at residential property, commercial property, hotel apartments or hotel, residences. Where is VAT applied in property purchases?
Well, VAT applies on the supply of goods and services. As far as property is concerned, property is regarded as goods. So the supply of any property by a taxable person in the UAE is subject to VAT at the standard rate of 5%, unless an exception applies and is either exempt or zero rated. Now, when it comes to property, there is an exception for residential real estate.
Correct.
All real estate, except if it's residential, is subject to 5% VAT unless it's residential real estate. And residential real estate essentially is property which you're living in as your personal residence. And also there's other types of properties which may be regarded as residential property. For example, orphanages, care homes. On the other hand, there's other types of property which may not be residential. So, for example, serviced accommodation.
Correct. Yeah, serviced accommodation, your hotel apartments, and VAT is applicable on these properties as well. Yeah, and obviously VAT is also paid on all of the subsequent fees that are associated with buying a property. So, if you're paying a commission to an agency for acquiring a property, all of the other associated fees with the land department, etc., are all VAT applicable. Exactly.
Absolutely. When it comes to commissions, of course, normally your service provider would be in the UAE. As a service provider in the UAE that's providing you services in the UAE, it would be subject to VAT, and there's no exception for these kind of services.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any tax incentives or benefits to investors buying in the real estate market?
When it comes to VAT, of course, every property is a sale or rental is subject to VAT. But when it comes to residential real estate, the first supply is zero rated, and any subsequent supply is exempt. When it comes to the supply of bare land, that's also exempt. There's a question mark what bare land is, and at some point it does change character. When it comes to corporate tax, there's no real exception as such. I think there's two things to know. If you operate in a free zone and under certain conditions, you may be able to benefit from 0%. When it comes to real estate, the only situation that 0% would apply is if you're set up in the free zone, you as the owner or the landlord, and you meet certain conditions, for example, substance requirements or transfer pricing requirements, and you either sell the property or lease the property to another person in a free zone, and the property is relocated in the free zone. So under these circumstances, instead of the normal corporate tax rate of 9%, which may be applicable, you may be able to benefit from 0%.
People that own property now, subject to the corporate tax?
Yes, it depends on, it depends on the structure. So if you're a UAE company, you'd be subject to corporate tax on your worldwide income, regardless of where you generate the income. If you're an international investor, a non-resident, you'd be subjected to income tax in the UAE on the income if you're doing a property business in the UAE through a permanent establishment. On the other hand, if you're just an investor, you don't have a business in the UAE.
As an individual,
okay.
Yeah. So if you own property as a company, you are subject to corporate tax. The title deed and the ownership is in a company name.
Yes.
Then any profits derived from that company, i.e., if you sell it, if there's a capital gains, you're liable for the tax, and if it's rented out, any income derived from that property, you are also subject to the corporate tax.
Correct. As a non-resident investor, as I was saying, if you have a property business in the UAE, you'd be taxable.
Okay.
As a permanent establishment. On the other hand, even without a property business, if you're a company and you're investing in the business, you'd be considered to have a nexus in the UAE if you have income from an immovable property. It could be capital gains, it could be rental income as well.
Yeah.
Is it true? I heard before, but I'm a bit confused. If you are a non-resident, so you live abroad and you do not have the golden visa or the residency, even as an individual, you are due a corporate tax on that property.
This is one of the benefits, you could say, or incentives. I mean, essentially, if you're an individual, whether you're non-resident or you're resident, and you generate personal income, and this income is not generated through a business, and you'll be considered to have generated personal income as opposed to income from a business if you're not required to have a license in order to undertake that activity, and you don't have that license. So if you're a typical investor in real estate and you're generating income from that real estate and an individual, you shouldn't be taxed.
Okay. So if, Mr. Smith is a resident in the UK, he decides that he wants to diversify his property portfolio, comes out, likes the opportunities that are available in Dubai. He purchases a property. He pays the normal, 4% land registry if it's a vanilla residential property and all of the associated fees. But if he rents it out, he's not liable for any tax in the UAE from the rental income. And if he sells it 3, 4, 5 years later on and there's some capital gains, he's not currently liable for any capital gains in the UAE.
There's no real changes. Of course,
Okay.
If you have holiday lettings and you'd have a management company employing people, that may constitute a business. So that's where you have to look at. But if you're just a pure investor and you own the property, you rent it out, it's that income would be regarded as personal income and not taxable.
Okay, interesting.
With regards to the compliance and avoiding penalties for corporate tax especially, as many people that own businesses now, there's so many new rules and it's not extremely clear right now. How can we go about making sure we're doing everything correctly and
on time as well? Yeah, I mean, what are the kind of latest? Where are we now? I suppose as well with corporate tax for those people that perhaps haven't been following it as intricately.
Of course, the law was issued in December, quite a long time ago. And the legislation became effective a long time ago, and it's already applicable to a lot of taxpayers because it came effective depending on the financial year of the company. So it applies to all taxpayers for financial years commencing on or after 1st of June 2023. to most people, they have a calendar year financial year, so it won't be applicable to them from this year. Of course, the law's been issued. We don't have a single set of executive regulations like VAT. So for corporate tax, there's a number of cabinet decisions and ministerial resolutions which you have to review and understand. I think the first thing is it's important to understand the rules and how they apply to you and understand the obligations which are applicable to you. Secondly, you need to think about what you've been doing historically and whether you need to make any changes in order to be compliant and also structured in an efficient way. The third thing is you need to keep abreast of all the developments. And there's lots of new decisions which are being issued on a daily basis. So you need to keep on top of them. The tax authority has also started to issue guidance in the form of guides. And they'll, in due course, once people have started filing tax returns, they will issue clarifications on their interpretation of the tax legislation.
Okay.
It's important to monitor these developments and keep up to date.
So when should one start paying?
Yeah, when are the tax return? When are these first tax returns going to start coming in, and when is it going to start being reviewed, and when are people going to start paying this corporation tax?
It depends on your financial year.
Okay.
So when corporate, if the first year corporate tax is applicable to you, the corporate tax will be due, and the first tax return will be due after the end of 9 months of your first financial year.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, in the UK it's quite simple, isn't it? It just runs April to April from memory. Yeah, and that is the financial year. So how is the financial year? It differs per company to company.
That's right. So a lot of companies have a calendar year financial year.
Okay.
There's other companies which follow the financial year of the group, and it may be a different financial year. It could be June to June. So it depends on the company really. But whichever the first period is subject to corporate tax, the corporate tax will be due, and the tax return will be due within months of the end of the financial year.
Okay, and at a kind of high level, for people that own businesses out there that are trying to kind of keep abreast of where we are and where the landscape is, or maybe there's people out there that are looking at setting up a company right now or have recently set up a company. What are the kind of earning exemptions? I mean, if you say you earn X in a calendar year, you're exempt up to a certain figure. What are the kind of thresholds as we currently stand for corporate tax? Where does it kick in?
I think the first thing is the reference point is taxable income. It's not revenue, and taxable income is essentially your accounting profit adjusted for tax purposes. So the first 375,000 of your taxable income would be subject to 0%, and any taxable income which exceeds this figure will be subject to 9% tax. But if you're a large company and you fall within the scope of BEPS Pillar 2, the UAE has incorporated this the global minimum tax under its tax law, so you may be subject to a higher rate of 15%.
Okay, go back one step. What was the term? If you were subject to BEPS,
if you're an entity which is part of a large multinational enterprise, what will happen if you have annual global consolidated revenue of 750 million euros?
Okay.
So if you fall in that category, the highest tax rate which will be applicable to you would be 15% rather than 9%.
So this is your Microsofts. This is your fortune companies, your large multinationals. Yeah. Okay.
You may have some larger property developers, property investment companies as well.
Yeah.
Correct. Interesting. Very good. So, what are the first steps? I mean, how can Tamimi help for individuals or companies that are still a little bit unsure? What are the next steps if they wanted to kind of reach out to you for a little bit of guidance and hand holding as to how they can best position themselves to make sure that they are compliant?
Yeah, as you said, the law is still very, very new and it still hasn't been properly tested. Of course, no one's yet filed the tax returns. So in terms of how the law will be interpreted and applied by the tax authority, by the courts, remains to be seen. We as a law firm, of course, assist clients, provide them guidance and advice on the impact of the corporate tax law on their operations and how they could be structured in an efficient way, just to make sure they comply. As I said, there is uncertainty and calls for questions of interpretations, and we're happy to guide the client and give them the pros and cons of different interpretations and hold their hand and give them solutions, in terms of the situations they're facing.
What would be your advice to any property kind of owners right now in regards to tax and what potentially could happen in the future? Do you see it changing further? Do you think this will be a while?
Yeah.
Of course, there's been a lot of tax development already over the last few years with the introduction of VAT and corporate tax. I don't see any new property taxes coming in. Okay. So that's something to be conscious of.
What about income tax? Do you see it happening?
Oh.
There's no discussion on the introduction of a personal income tax at all at the moment. So I don't foresee that in the near future.
That's good to know.
Yeah, exactly. That'll make a lot of people very happy. Exactly. Good. Look, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of add in about anything that you're noticing that's being changed, or any latest news in either the VAT, the taxation space, or anything else that you kind of wanted to add that you might find? Anybody that is either a property owner, property investor, and dare I say it, business owner or business investor, anything else on the kind of existing or upcoming landscape that you think might be worth thinking about, or any kind of latest information that you think that we might have missed that you might feel valuable for them?
When it comes to VAT, I think it's important for property owners or prospective property owners to be aware that there is a special procedure for the payment of VAT when it comes to commercial property. Mm-hmm. A lot of owners are not aware of this when they're purchasing the property.
Mm-hmm.
Is it only on the first time when it leaves the developer, or is it every time when you buy and resell?
On every sale of commercial property, typically speaking, the procedure is the supplier has to account for VAT, so the seller in their VAT return. And whether they pass it on to the buyer depends on the contractual arrangement. Normally, the price would be exclusive of VAT and is passed on to the customer, the buyer. However, when it comes to the sale of commercial real estate, there's a special procedure there where instead of the supplier paying the VAT, the buyer has to pay the VAT before the title transfer.
Right, okay.
And the title transfer will not be affected unless the buyer pays the VAT. In practice, there has been mixed implementation, and so you have to really watch the space because it's changing as we speak. But at least in theory, the buyer has to pay the VAT before the title transfer, and the title cannot transfer without this payment. The seller would account for VAT in the normal way, and then make an adjustment for the payment of VAT. I think in terms of generally speaking, otherwise, of course, UAE has gone through a lot of tax reform. Mm-hmm. Introduction of VAT, introduction of corporate tax now. So going forward, every single business decision will have tax implications. So whenever you're thinking of buying property, selling property, expanding your business, setting up a new business, you have to think about tax. Mm-hmm. And the impact tax is going to have on your business decisions, the cost is going to have, and also compliance, because this is important. It could affect your business decision.
Correct. Look, I think the good thing is that when we look at it on a global basis, we are still much our rates of taxation are still much particularly corporate taxation. They're still much lower than a lot of countries in the world. So we are still very, very lucky. Be it from a VAT and a corporate tax figure. So. But it is more and more important now, more so than ever, to make sure, anybody that's making these business decisions are aligned, with companies, obviously like yourself, to hold their hand and guide them through this to make sure that they're doing everything properly,
Really, thank you so much for coming on.
100%.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's extremely useful to so many people, this topic right now. So thank you very much.
Good. Any other questions? If anybody that's watching, if there's anything that we have, anything that's not been answered, Feel free to fire some questions through afterwards, and we'll see if Shiraz might have a couple of minutes to answer some of those questions along the way. But yeah, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. We will provide the links and the contact details for your organisation as well, for Tamimi, for anybody that does want to reach out. And yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jade.
Lovely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.